All right, I think that we are live now and properly streaming. The stream is just getting started. Okay, we're good. That did it. Sorry about that. That's
no worries.
One of the 1,200 different settings you have to get to make this thing work. So
you're the master of the controls at this point.
I don't know about that. All right, Jordan, we're gonna get out of your way and we're gonna make this happen.
Excellent. Let's do it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Tech Report Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Drake. I'm joined by Scott Wasson, Cyril Kowalski, Jeff Gager, and you, joining us live at twitch.tv/The Tech Report. That's that really smarmy sort of like, and now we're back on the Tech Report Podcast. It is fun to be streaming live. We've got a nice little lively chat room conversation happening. So if you're listening to this post-mortem, then feel free to check it out. Actually, what we've been doing now, it looks like we've got it embedded into our website. So you can just watch it. You can just be home, right? Because the Tech Report is home. You can just be home and watch us live. You don't have to go over to twitch.tv. Except that I'm watching a pre-roll ad of some guy talking in a polo shirt. So, with the exception of an occasional advertorial intruder, join us live. Otherwise, welcome to the official podcast of the Tech Report at techreport.com, the #1 place for news and reviews in the computer hardware world. We always start off with sort of the sort of most, I don't know if it's pop culture or just sort of geeky thing that's going on, but really on the top of the list, it has to be the first trailer for Star Wars Episode 7, starring all the original cast, although none of them feature in this particular trailer. And of course, a slew of newcomers set in a time 30 years after Return of the Jedi. And it's taken the internet over since the Friday after Thanksgiving that it was debuted. Very smart timing, I think, on the part of Disney. It's crazy to think of them as the Star Wars company, but Disney. So let's start with Cyril. Good old Cyril. Cyril, A, are you a big Star Wars fan? And B, what did you think of the trailer?
I like Star Wars, I guess.
All right, Jeff,
I've seen them all. All right. No, it's the trailer's interesting. I mean, it feels a little bit cheesy. It feels sort of, like the droid with the spinning ball thing is kind of weird, and I don't know that the narration is very cheesy. But if you go back and watch the original Star Wars, very kind of along the same lines as well. It's just kind of we think of it because we saw it. Most of us saw it when we were sort of kids, so we kind of think of it as very serious and very very real. But it's not. It's full of like cheesy dialogue and I don't know. So it's
there's certainly a return. There's a return to that form with this, right?
Yeah.
It seems. We don't know. I mean, we haven't really seen any dialogue. We've just seen some scenes that include the Millennium Falcon, that include a lightsaber that's caused much consternation on the web because it has the two sort of beamed handguard situations happening. Jeff, also, are you a Star Wars fan, and what did you think? And also, are you in your garage right now? What is happening?
I'm in my garage. My office is right off sort of the kitchen and the living room in the house, so at 6:30 on a Thursday night, that's not a good time to have complete silence hopefully in the region where someone is making me dinner. So I'm out in the garage today. But yeah, I mean, I like Star Wars. I've tried to sort of stay away from it because I sort of found the same thing Cyril was talking about, how you go back and watch the movies and they're not as good as how you remember them. And I'd rather sort of remember Star Wars how I remember it, rather than seeing it with my old jaded eyes now. So I'm looking forward to the movies. I think they'll probably be entertaining, but I'm not really expecting sort of greatness from them.
Scott, as editor-in-chief of the podcast, I need you to A, tell me what you think, of the website. I need you to A, tell me what you thought of the trailers, and B, decide what should the punishment be for the heresy these two men are speaking about these movies not holding up. Like, we're thinking, docking their pay? Do we sort of cut out the bonus program? What should, because I feel like this should not be taken lightly. I mean, this is serious heresy.
I mean, the obvious thing you start with, given who we are, is this public humiliation, right?
I think that's a good start.
That's
I think
that's
they
where we.
accomplished
That's,
that already.
Aren't we already there?
right. That's
I
where
think
we
we're already
begin.
there.
But
Yeah,
this.
Jeff's got a camera in his garage for heaven's
Yeah.
sake. So.
But Jordan, this sounds to me like two very shell-shocked individuals who were, as children, loved Star Wars, and then, as men, went to watch the prequels, and now will not admit a love to the overall series. Which, honestly, who among us doesn't feel some of that? So I was like, no, I'm a bigger nerd than that. Like, I'm such a big nerd, I don't like what nerds like.
No, I get
Oh, come on.
in all seriousness, I think the point is taken that if you, for instance, watch A New Hope, and you just pay attention to how whiny Luke is as a character, it's really funny.
Owen.
Right. I was gonna go down to Tashi for some power converters. Like he's almost at that pitch. So I can understand that, you put that together with just some of the humor of those films, and yeah, there's a bit of a campiness to it. But I think that, to Scott's point, I think the prequels have also sort of poisoned the well a little bit for the Star Wars, and to me, much the same way that season 4 of Arrested Development's made me kind of not want to go back and watch season 1, 2, and 3. So there's lots of that. But Scott, what did you think of this new trailer?
I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how I was going to react. I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm on record about this, Jordan, but my deal is I feel like I'm being really catered to by somebody who's a master of doing this in a way that's somewhat patronizing when I watched the 2 Star Trek movies that J.J. Abrams did. Like, he hit all the notes, and he had all the characters, and he moved all the set pieces, and everything happened, but it wasn't great. It was just exceptionally slickly well done. And I'm worried for Star Wars because I'm afraid that we could get something where this big company takes very little risk by going with J.J. Abrams, but we don't get, like, greatness. We get mediocrity and slickness. And so I was worried about that, and I didn't know what I was going to think when I saw the trailer, but honestly, like, the little snippets that we had, they all got me. Like, they all hit the right notes. I didn't know I was going to react so emotionally to it, but just the beginning with the stormtrooper looking so frantic, it was like, and you do get this a lot with some of the newer Star Trek stuff too, honestly, but it's like, there's a really good actor showing us this frantic, like, reaction to something. It's kind of like you get with some of the Star Trek stuff where, like, the old cast was kind of guys they had in the 60s and we all love them, but they're not the greatest actors. And then the new cast is like these really, like, stars in waiting young people who they could pick from anybody, and they got these folks, and they're kind of virtuosos compared to the earlier guys in terms of just acting chops and charisma and stuff like that. And that guy acting at the beginning of it, I thought he was, like, really great at showing that. And then the rest of it was fun. I liked the little droid rolling the ball and all that. But the thing was when we got to the where the Millennium Falcon did the loop. And
Falcon,
I just
not Falcon.
That was it. They just got me there. Like, that was awesome. I was like a little kid again, and I had the action figure thing, and I was just flying it around. That was awesome. So they won me over there. I don't know what's going to happen with this movie, but I loved that. I just loved it.
Right. No, I get it. You didn't cry when you found out you had a new kid on the way, but you see the new Star Wars trailer and Daddy starts to tear up a little bit. I understand.
It was just Jordan.
What does your son think of it, by the way? Junior Damage, who I know is lurking in the chat room.
Well, you have to.
Scoundrel.
Maybe he'll tell us
You
in the
nerf
chat
herder.
room. It's hard to get him to give us a reaction, like, in real life at this point.
That doesn't involve a meme with a picture of Cyril in it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
That's his way of expressing himself.
So what did you
anyway,
think, Jordan?
I think it's one of those things where I didn't see anything that bothered me, but I didn't see anything that was like, yes, I'm in. I'm already in. It's Star Wars. I'm gonna watch it.
Didn't do anything for you?
The what?
The Millennium Falcon loop didn't do anything for you?
I mean, no, it was great. I'm excited, but I'm the kind of person that I have more questions than I have feelings. I'm like, okay, There are still TIE fighters. Is the Empire still around? Why are there still stormtroopers? Okay, who's the dude with the lightsaber? Who's the dude doing the voiceover? Sounds an awful like Benedict Cumberbatch. Is Benedict Cumberbatch going to be in this movie? If not, whose voice is that? Is that Mark Hamill's voice? I'm not sure if that's Mark Hamill's voice. I can't imagine him doing something that deep. I'm pretty sure he's got a higher voice. I don't think it's Mark Hamill's voice. And then I'm reading endless Reddit, thread conversations trying to understand all the details. I'm a details nut. That's what I'm interested in. So. I'm the kind of person that I immediately go find the Verge article where they take frame by frame and make all the little points about, oh, well, this is that and this is this. And so I'm excited, but I'm just not, it wasn't like the Age of Ultron trailer or something that I felt like really sort of hit all the marks where I'm like I wanted to see Mark Hamill or Carrie Fisher.
Oh, right. Yeah, I don't
Which,
know
by
that
the way,
I
it's
do.
funny.
They're kind of going to be wrinkled and sad. Like, is that...
Yeah. Well, that was the one thing that just occurred to me. Is if there's anything that we must not be in this movie is Carrie Fisher plus that same gold bikini. Because let's just be honest, that's not... 30 years later, that's just not going to work well.
Or Mark Hamill in that bikini.
Yeah, just have to give it to Mark Hamill.
Yeah, that would be... Yeah.
Well, I'm sure he's got the moves to support it. I'm also, I will say this for the record, very worried about Harrison Ford, and for two reasons. A, he was so bad in Crystal Skull. And also, I just get the sense that he's at this point of his career where he doesn't listen to anybody, so he can be bad and no one can tell him you're being bad. So my fear is that he'll just sort of be like, rah, rah, the whole time, and J.J. Abrams like, hey, Harrison, could you just think called acting? And he'll be like, rah, and not be receptive to that. That is a fear of mine. It keeps me awake at night, as they say. One other trailer to discuss very quickly. There's a new Terminator Genesis trailer. Scott, I think you said you've seen it. Jeff, have you seen it?
Yep.
And Cyril has not.
I actually watched it muted while we were.
You didn't need the dialogue. It kind of explains
Nope.
itself.
You do need the soundtrack, though. You do need like the theme.
Dun 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 dun.
Well, there was Daenerys, and then like a Terminator with knife arms, and then there was Arnold and a lot of explosions.
I'm back. Yeah.
And then a bust like this.
It's so funny. Read the Wikipedia description. Kyle Reese comes back to find out that Sarah Connor was tried to kill, which was orphaned when she was 9 by another Terminator, and then another Terminator saved her and raised her as his own. So
wow,
it's pretty convoluted. And
wait, is that canon? Because in the original Terminator, she hadn't she didn't believe the Terminator was a Terminator. And so
correct. That's the whole premise. The premise of this is a reboot. Is that before the events of Terminator 1, Sarah Connor was orphaned at age 9 and saved by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who then trained her how to fight, destroys the Terminator, comes back to kill her in Terminator 1, and then I guess fights a T-1000 that is not the same as the one in Terminator 2, but there's a lot of crossover. It's going to be like a whole replay. And yeah, I'm a little confused. I think it's going to be confusing probably. But, look, it had Arnold Schwarzenegger jumping out of a helicopter and using his bodies as a missile to destroy another helicopter. And, I got wood. So...
Oh boy.
Wow. Okay.
It wouldn't be a podcast if Jordan didn't say something we're going to bleep out.
You had to think. I mean, it doesn't really matter at all what they do because there's this throwaway line in the trailer where they're like, that timeline doesn't exist, right?
Right.
And it's all time travel stuff, and so they can do anything. And they're based on the choices that whoever makes whenever, then there's another timeline for every single one of them. And so there are infinite possible Terminator stories they could tell, none of which have to matter because they don't have to commit to them for the long term.
I'll use this time to say that if you've ever seen the Sarah Connor Chronicles, it was pretty cool. And what I liked about the Sarah Connor Chronicles was the way that they did play with things like time travel. And for instance, they had a Terminator whose job it was to kill a mayor whose job it was to kill someone whose job it was to, I think it had something to do with like a robot factory that was going to be built. And this mayor shut down the robot factory. So the Terminators, the robots, send a Terminator back through time to kill this mayor. But essentially what they do is they sent it far back in time, and it actually like goes back to the 1920s, and it builds itself into the wall of the city hall, so that right when the mayor is being elected, it can burst through and kill him at the right moment. It's just cool shit like that. Sorry, no French. And then the other one was like a Terminator that shows up to stockpile certain types of metals they'll need later, and locks itself in a vault scheduled to turn on when Judgment Day happens, and they have to stop it. It just was cool. So maybe there's gonna be some themes of that in here, and it's gonna work out. But anyway, it's probably just gonna suck and disappoint us all. Moving on, Scott, you've got a pending phone review that we're
That's
not
a secret
tease
we're not talking about now that we live streamed it.
Oh, good to know.
That's okay. It's just working on that. I hadn't talked about it.
All right.
Anyway.
So I will cut that out for the final version.
That's
but anyway,
okay.
it's all right. It's just junior damage in the chat room. Anyway, or not. It is of interest that, or at least I think it's of interest that I just bought an iPad Mini 2. It hasn't come yet, so I'm looking forward to that. But I have, as I mentioned on previous episodes, been thinking about the iPad Air, and I finally decided that the two things that I want to do the most, which is use an iPad or tablet device to read piano music while I play around on the piano, and also as a device to read with. The Mini made more sense than the Air just from a size perspective, and I only got the 2 because it's the exact same. One of the things that confuses me most about the 3 is the only differentiator between the Mini 2 and the Mini 3 is the Touch ID home button, and the fact that the 3 is available in gold. So if you don't really need fingerprints, you get the same screen, the same processor for $100 less, which is odd. But I went ahead and jumped on that, and it should come early next week. I'm very excited, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I got to say about that.
Okay.
All right.
No, I mean that's it. I've got a small tablet. I always talk about having Nexus 7. It's great to read on. I think you'll like it. I think you'll like the Mini, and I think the Mini is the right aspect ratio for the web, which the Nexus 7 is definitely not. Because you got to turn it into portrait mode, and then it's like looking at the world through a tank slit, and it's not great. So I'm looking forward to hear what you think about it. It is there. The choices are weird though, because you're not getting the A8. You're getting the A. What's it? You're getting the A6, not the A7 either.
No. It's the A7.
I think. I don't know. Okay, I need to look at the specs. Anyway,
It's A7.
It's not the latest, and they didn't update it when they did the new one.
Which is weird.
Right.
Honestly, just really weird.
Right. So A7 was in the iPhone 5. No, A8's iPhone 5S. A7 and iPhone 5. A7 is the same thing as the Mini. A8 is in the 6 and 6S as well.
And the iPad Air too.
Right. But for whatever reason, not in the Mini.
It's still a complete mind boggle to me why it is they have 3 versions of the Mini. They've got the Mini 1, 2, and 3. The 1 is still available, and I get that they want to have the cheaper version, but Apple just never had that much skew. It's
no,
just nuts.
and keeping the 2 and the 3 around at the same time is the weirdest part of the whole thing.
Right.
And I mean, you went for the cheaper one, but
right. So it kind of actually worked for them in that sense. I still bought a unit.
Right. But if the Touch ID really adds $100 to the cost, then they should never include Touch ID at all. So it didn't make any sense.
And then they got this original, with 163 pixels DPI, $249, 16 gigabyte, which again I think it's probably just an education play.
Or cheap. They got to fight off cheap Android tablets, so they do that.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I get why one of those should hang around, but they've got so many now with different colors, RAM amounts, 3G or LTE, and not 3G or LTE, just Wi-Fi. It's a crazy number of SKUs. Anyway, we talked about this before, so
yep, we're all set.
Yeah.
Okay. A few listener mail questions. You can email jdrake@techreport.com if you want to have your question read on air. First one here is from Bobby. Bobby breaks new ground with his question, which if you guys refresh your agenda thing, you should see here. He starts his boy, I can't talk tonight. He starts his email off with the kind of interesting opener. He says, "Hi Jordan, you funky monkey." Gotta be honest, I don't see it.
I think it has to do with your podcast image. on
guess
the
it
video
does.
version
I guess it
when
does.
your webcam was not working.
And I can only say, just very solemnly, how dare you? I have a question / subject for the TR podcast, he says. I recently saw a 144 hertz Asus monitor at a friend's house. And the motion clarity / smoothness while playing games is really noticeable, comparable to my Dell 2709W. And now I really want one. Yet when I read the TR forums and the comments, everyone talks about TN panels like they're produced by the devil himself, and to stay away from them no matter what. Should I stay away from 144 hertz TN panels, even if I can't see anything wrong with the image quality? I really want that smooth / clear image that the 144 hertz monitor brings. Best wishes, Bobby the Gorilla. Oh, that makes sense now. So, Scott, this is for you, probably?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is really straightforward, and I've done a number of monitor reviews on TN panels lately. There are a couple things to say. One is that you're not going to get 144 hertz or probably 120 hertz. You're probably not going to get really above 60 hertz with the available IPS panels out there right now. And IPS is kind of the gold standard of color reproduction and viewing angles and all of that. But those panels are not as fast. And so gaming-oriented panels are TN usually. And that's just the trade-offs of the different techs. The other one is that, I've been saying this in several of the reviews that I've posted about 4K TN panels, G-Sync TN panels with high refresh, like the Asus PG278Q, which is the best gaming monitor I've ever seen in my life. Look, the latest TN panels are better than the sort of stereotypical TN panel that you would get on a low-cost laptop or something like that. This is not a netbook screen. They can produce 16.8 million colors. They do a nice job with contrast ratios, and they have good. You can calibrate them. Some of them come out of the box reasonably good in terms of color gamut. We measured this with the colorimeter, and their color gamut is comparable to, not the best IPS displays, but the typical IPS display. And even the off-angle viewing is not as bad. That's really the big weakness of TN panels is off-angle viewing. And the latest desktop displays, what you get is the colors might shift a little bit, or the contrast might wash out a little bit if you really move your head around instead of sitting right in front of it. But there's not nearly as dramatic as it has been in the past, or it is in cheaper ones. And it's not something that is easily noticeable in every case. And you don't have that complete inversion of colors that you sometimes get with the cheap panels, where when you go like if you're sitting in a monitor and you stand up and you're looking at it from a pretty acute angle. So I think that for gaming displays, the best ones out there are TN based, and they're good enough that when you're not gaming, that you can do photo editing, video editing, and things like that. And if you've calibrated it, or if it has like an sRGB mode and comes out of the box reasonably close to calibrated, or at least like factory calibrated a little bit, then they can be quite decent, quite good. I don't want to say they're as good as the best IPS panels, but boy, they're not bad. So yeah, don't be afraid. If you like the image and you want the smoothness, get one.
Next question here is from, well, let's see, what did he go by? His sign off is NTMBK, but he says James, so I'm not sure which we'll go with. But James says, "Hey Jordan, reckon you'll be reviewing the." I should rephrase that. Do you reckon you'll be reviewing the Alienware Alpha on the website? It looks like a very nice little PC, and shrinking the gaming desktop should make Cyril happy. Cyril, would that make you happy to get your hands on an Alienware Alpha?
Yes. I guess so.
All right.
He's a talker, this one.
Say.
He's got a lot to say. Did we write about the Alienware Alpha?
I don't think so.
I think that's the Steam box that they're selling with Windows now because Steam
Oh,
OS isn't
yeah.
ready,
Right.
which is probably how it should have been sold in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I don't think it's necessarily going to be fast enough to run some of these newer games at good resolutions and high detail levels.
For the living room, 1080p is all you need.
As a cheap gaming PC, if you don't have a living room system, well, I don't know. Maybe it is.
Unless you've got a 4K display in your living room.
Yeah, that's right.
And you sit really close.
Yeah, it's just the fact that it's kind of like bare bones in terms of the hardware. I mean, a lot of these newer games do require like 8 gigs of RAM and fairly like high-end GPUs, like Assassin's Creed Unity, and some games do require that for the wrong reasons, but they still need a fair amount of horsepower. So if you're hoping to drive like a really modern game, at 1080p, a really low-end system like this might not be the way to go.
Well, you can get this with 8 gigs of RAM. It's not saying what GPU it comes with. It's just saying GeForce GTX GPU, 2 gigabytes.
I think,
But they've got like Core i7 processor option. It looks like one of the 35-watt ones. It's a quad core, up to 3 gigahertz. I mean, it's probably a Maxwell GPU, though. That'd be my guess.
Like a GTX 750 Ti or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't really paid attention to it. I think one problem here is somebody has asked those of us, we're all people who build our own PCs, if we want this pre-built PC that starts at $550 and goes up, and compromises gaming power for miniaturization. And we're looking at it going, I don't know. Like, I have a better home theater PC now, and so I'm not really the guy to like endorse this. It's a great concept, but I don't know. Not even Microsoft and Sony made the size trade-offs that these folks are making. They've got, because more volume means it's easier to cool. It can be quieter. It can move more air, and so I don't know.
I just don't get the volume thing too. Like, do people not have adequate room for sort of like an old school, like, remember when home entertainment units used to fit CD players and DVD players, and aren't the spots still the same size? Like, is there any real benefit to having something smaller in there, or is it just all people who live in really, really tiny apartments and are mounting things on the wall or something? There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of benefit to this.
I don't know. I think some of it is just size is a marketing tool. Jordan has talked about this. You got to make it smaller. People get excited about it, and you can pay more. You will pay more to get the mobile versions of parts where the chips are binned well, where they'll run at lower wattage to fit into different power envelopes, which is exactly what's happening here, right? Which is why these things cost. And also, it's Alienware. I mean, it's going to be expensive, but these things cost $550 to $900, and they don't have tons of horsepower. So I get it. It's just not necessarily, like I said, I'm not the audience for that, because like I got a better one upstairs.
We have some questions here from the chat. Let's see. There's a question about the SSD Endurance article, and we can get to that when we talk about that very shortly. Before we do that, question here. Not sure if this is going to be the last podcast for the year, but any thoughts toward... And actually, let's think about this, guys. Hold on a second. This will be the last podcast for the year, because I'm going to Colombia in 2 weeks.
Colombia.
Colombiano. Buenos tardes. Buenos dias. Buenas noches. I always love the voices of those old, like back in the 90s, we used to use this old PC software that would teach you language, and you'd like click through it, and it was always like, hola. ¿Dónde es la biblioteca? It was like this really weird voice. Anyways, good times. Me llamo Jordan. All right. So he says, not sure if this is going to be the last podcast of the year, but any thoughts toward the best products of 2014 and what you guys are looking forward to in 2015? What are your expectations on the CPU and GPU fronts? Any gadget that you wished might have been released in 2015. Also, I'd like to know future winning lottery numbers. And the numbers are 5, 3, 14, 20, Z. They threw in letters in 2015. It's a whole new thing. Anyway, there's a lot of questions here.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
we
I
just-
think we're going to talk about our Christmas gift guide, which
That's true.
which will
That's
be kind of a rewind to some of the best products of this year. So let's address that then.
Yep. agreed.
But we should talk about what we're looking forward to for next year.
Big movie year. Let's just say that right now. Next year's gonna be a big
We
year
already
for
talked.
movies.
Yeah, we did.
Alright.
There are a lot of movies, but CPU and GPU fronts real quick. Broadwell goes wider, right? It's a Core M now, but we'll get Core i7, Core i5, Core i3 variants of that. First in Ultrabooks, and then like maybe one desktop chip or a couple desktop chips, although I've heard rumors it's been further delayed. And then following that is Skylake, and I don't know that that's next year, but it might be late next year that we actually get that from Intel. AMD's got this Carrizo APU that I think we did a little news item on. They're going to have the Excavator core and updated graphics, and we don't know what else. And those are going to ship. Cyril, did you write that up? They're going to, or Jeff, you wrote it up. They're going to ship products by mid-year, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's happening. And then I expect that we've got one big Maxwell chip from Nvidia and one little Maxwell chip from Nvidia. I expect more Maxwell variants, both chips and graphics cards based on them, next year. And then AMD's got to have, I mean, everybody's talking about the Radeon R300 series, like an R380 is rumored to be coming. I don't think we know very much about what it's going to be yet. AMD's playing it really close to its chest, but they've got something coming in terms of new GPUs, and I think they're coming next, like first half, maybe first quarter of next year, depending on the latest rumors, and we'll kind of have to see how that, whether they actually hit with those. But that's what's coming on CPU and GPU front from the big PC hardware guys. I don't think I missed anything huge. Do you guys?
I don't think for that stuff. No.
Right. Now, FreeSync monitors are coming probably early next quarter, and we may hear more about those at CES. More G-Sync monitors. I expect more variety, including hopefully G-Sync IPS, and those things are like there are a few of those out now, and I expect we'll see more. So that will be good. And CES is coming up, guys. I'm making plans for meetings and stuff, and I was kind of thinking today about what would be coming in connection with that. Oculus Rift, we might see the production version of that next year, because they've got the version that they showed at CES last year that I wrote about. That was their second developer kit, the Crystal Cove, I think. And now they have a newer one that they've demoed that's even better and smaller and higher resolution, effectively just because they changed the optics and mess with it. And there's a possibility that they could finish the product and ship next year. They're kind of making noise about it coming soon. If that happens, that'll be the biggest thing, maybe the biggest thing in gaming next year.
Yeah. I mean, they did say it was years, months, not years away, but many months, which could be like, next year or like early 2016.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what are they going to show at CES. I'm going to try and schedule a meeting with them and go see what they've got going on, and maybe hopefully look at the latest prototype. And then what is their messaging going to be around that, because they'll have to say something. Although they may not say much more than they already have, I guess we'll see. So that's fun, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of other things that are kind of on the roadmaps. But Jordan, is there anything you're excited about next year that we haven't touched on? Movies. There are a lot of movies.
Movies, that's gotta be it at this point.
Yeah. So that's there's a pretty good crop of things, and that's just the stuff that we already know to expect. So it's a pretty good answer, I think.
There's also going to be some PCI Express SSDs. From what I'm hearing, we should see some at CES, probably based on the Sandforce controller that has been supposedly coming out for quite a while now. It sounds like it maybe will be ready in time for CES, or at least for drives in the first quarter. So that'll be
Yeah,
interesting for storage.
that could be a huge deal actually with the NVMe and all of that. If they actually take advantage of the interface, we get a huge boost in performance, and it may kind of change the way we think about some things. It may not too, but
Oh, I'm sorry. I remember. I remember what it is I'm excited about. iPhone 6s.
that's probably going to happen.
Oh, Apple Watch will be interesting to see that play out.
That's true. That's coming. Actually, I'm as a
My mom's coming to visit me in New York. No.
sorry, dude. As a CPU guy, I'm excited about the 6S actually because Apple is one of the most innovative companies on CPU cores right now.
That's true.
So if they get like a lot more IPC out of their next core, they're going to be in Haswell's Skylake territory, and they're actually quite a bit bigger than Intel, so they could be like the big dog in the CPU world at that point. So yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever happens there. I think it could surprise people.
All right, we're gonna answer one more question from the chat, and we need to move on for the sake of time. Actually, both the questions are about the SSD endurance test. What do you know?
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Jeff Gazier, this is the crazy experiment you've been running over the past
Over a year.
Over a
Since
year.
last summer.
the past 12 months, as they say. 6 SSDs, a suicide mission to discover just how far they can go. And how far have we gone? What are we at? Two freaking petabytes.
Yeah.
It
It's
sounds like
kind of insane.
No.
Only two drives made it that far. And one of them is a Sandforce-based drive that we're using compressible data with. So that's actually only written 1.4 terabytes to the flash. But still, that the two drives made it this far is pretty incredible. We had 3 of the drives die out before the petabyte threshold. Another one died at 1.2 petabytes. And then these 2 that just keep going. They sort of refuse to die. And the interesting thing is they're kind of coping differently with the volume of writes that we have. The one drive, which is kind of I guess if you wanted to crown a winner so far, it would be the 840 Pro, which has written 2 petabytes without any errors at all. The drive does seem to be sacrificing its flash at a steady rate. There's over 5,500 reallocated sectors so far. So basically over 8 gigabytes of the flash in this 256 gig drive has been retired and deemed no longer usable. But it still has about 40% of its flash reserves intact. And it looks like the drive will keep going. It's had no errors. No problem in any of our retention tests. Its performance has remained fairly consistent, which has really been true of all of the drives. So that drive is in fairly good shape. The second one is this Kingston HyperX drive. And the interesting thing with this drive is that it should have died a long time ago. This is actually the second HyperX drive that we tested. The first one was tested, like all the other drives, with incompressible data. And that one burned out at around 730 terabytes of writes. Now that's a lot, especially given that most of these drives are only rated for a couple hundred terabytes each. So all of these drives have far exceeded what they were supposed to do according to the official endurance specifications. Now what's interesting about these 2 HyperX drives is that even if you factor in compression, the second one should have died at about the 1.1 petabyte mark, because that's when it would have written about as much data to the flash as the first drive that we tested. But the drive keeps going. It's at 2 petabytes now, and the flash is surprisingly intact. There's only about 120 megabytes that has been lost due to flash failures. There is a catch with this drive. We had a couple of uncorrectable errors around the petabyte mark. So it's the kind of thing that you can, if you encounter an uncorrectable error, it could result in data loss or data corruption. It could crash applications of your system. So we'd recommend sort of taking a drive out of service if you do encounter one with uncorrectable errors. But it still keeps writing data, and it's apparently writing most of it reliably because it's passed all of our retention tests so far. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that drive. The first one kind of died suddenly. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this one accumulate a whole bunch of reallocated sectors in a fairly short span of time and then just sort of die at that point.
Wow.
So, yeah, the HyperX thing is interesting because you've got this SamForce controller can compress some data, and we expected that the one with compressible data would last longer because it actually writes less data to the flash array for the same amount of host writes, right?
Yeah.
But like that difference between this drive and the other one is not that big, right? And not as big as the difference between how long one lasted and the other.
Right. If you look at we've got a graph in the review that shows the host writes versus the flash writes for both the HyperX drives. So you can see that for 1 point, sort of the amount of data that killed the first drive, we reached that with the second drive at about 1.1 terabytes. So now we're at 2 terabytes, or 2 petabytes, sorry, which works out to sort of 1.4 sort of compression adjusted writes to the flash, which is basically double what we wrote to the other drive. And it's kind of, it's a testament to the fact that this is a limited sample size and flashware is very much dependent on sort of the physical degradation of individual NAND cells. And due to natural variances in semiconductor manufacturing, you will probably get some flash that is just more robust than others. And what happened with the first drive is it suffered a whole bunch of flash failures over the course of about 120 gigabytes of writes, or 120 terabytes of writes. And that hasn't happened with the second drive yet, but it's managed to write quite a lot more data. So it sort of shows that, some drives, even within the same family with the same controller and the same NAND, will last longer than others.
Yeah, and I guess there are a couple relevant points to make it related. That one is all of the drives that we tested well exceeded, we've said this before, they well exceeded their rated specifications and well exceeded what you could probably write to a drive if you tried, unless you tried in the very abusive way that we did of just turning them on for a year without stopping almost, right? Normal consumer use, you just don't get to these data write levels.
Not even close. The SSDs in my desktop are sort of at 2 terabytes of writes over a couple of years, and I've been reading through the comments on this story and where it's been linked elsewhere, and most people are sort of under 10 terabytes of writes total for their SSDs, and that's even for drives that have been in service for several years. So the idea that SSDs do burn out, the flash does degrade, it just does so in a manner that isn't going to affect typical consumers.
Yeah. And so that's the good news from this. The other thing is, and you kind of mentioned this, but we couldn't test 12 copies or 5 copies even of every drive model. It just wasn't feasible for what we were doing, and so the fact that one model of drive has survived longer than the others isn't necessarily an indicator that that brand is awesome and the others are terrible at all. It's not. We don't have enough data for that. But we kind of, the one big result that we got out of this was consumer SSDs do survive a lot longer than their ratings, because all of them did that. But beyond that, there wasn't much else that you'd take away. I guess you could take away that TLC NAND doesn't last quite as long as MLC, which we kind of thought, but we kind of verified that. But that was one sample TLC, right?
Well, it was one sample. You can see from the flash failures for that drive that it started reallocating sectors much earlier. So if you sort of have a comparison, we have the 840 series and the 840 Pro, which are both Samsung NANDs from the same sort of generation, just one has an extra bit per cell. So you can see there both drives are sort of sacrificing a lot of their flash as wear piles up, but that started happening a lot sooner on the 840 series after only a couple hundred terabytes of writes, whereas on the 840 Pro, the reallocated sectors didn't start piling up until after sort of 500-600 terabytes of writes.
Right. It's just
so it's sort of clear that TLC is weaker, but it doesn't necessarily mean, because that drive lasted longer than a couple of the MLC based ones, although it did suffer from a whole bunch of uncorrectable errors at several points during its life. So it does seem, I mean, it is only one sample, but that TLC NAND is more sensitive to wear and more sensitive to some of the issues that come along with it.
Yeah, and the other thing that we kind of learned that is interesting, that was the difference between the drives, and it wasn't a huge sample size, but in this case it was a little bit less about that, was the way in which they die, which seems to vary based on what the controller decides to do, and maybe some randomness, I don't know.
Yeah, there's supposed to. We haven't really had one die as it was supposed to. There were some that were supposed to go into a read-only mode and that just didn't happen. Part of the problem is that we don't know exactly. I'm not sitting here watching the drives to know exactly when they failed. So the application that we're using to load the drive with writes continuously is still trying to continuously write to the drive, even when it reaches sort of a failure condition where you would think it would slip into a read-only state. So yeah, I mean, and then some drives are not designed to even preserve that at all. They're just, they will write to a certain point, and then after a reboot, they'll fail to come back up. So it's a little bit different, and I'm actually kind of curious to see what happens with the second HyperX drive, to see if it fails in the same manner, at least, that the first one did, where it provided a bunch of errors, but we were able to pull some data off the drive, but then after a reboot, it didn't show up.
Right. So the other thing we measured was performance. You want to talk about that briefly? What happens over time to an SSD as we abuse it with more and more writes and they pile up?
The basic takeaway is not a whole lot happens. I mean, that's something that we observed with all of the drives. The 840 Pro seems to be a little bit more prone to having slower performance in one of the write speed tests that we're running, but it's not consistently slow. And that may just be a factor of, maybe during one of the benchmark runs, it hits some flash failures and has to recover for those, since it is losing flash at a fairly high rate. But for the most part, these drives have maintained consistent performance basically up until the very end of their lives. We didn't have any drives die in sort of this last 500 terabyte stretch. But if you look at the graphs for some of the other drives that have died previously, you can see that especially in the endurance test write speed, which is the speed at which the files that are being loaded onto these drives, the average speed that those accumulate, actually tends to drop off for some of the drives at the very, very end of their lives. And we also see the write speeds getting a little more erratic right close to the very end. But that's literally, when the drive is starting to spit out smart errors, warning of imminent failure. Kind of performance degradation. So
that's a good result, actually. I kind of expected that it might be worse than this as drives got closer to the end or whatever, because they're dealing with wonky flash at that point, right? And they're dealing with trying to write and it may not work and things like that. But look, really, it's not a very measurable change in any case, except for the extreme is going to die now.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think what the firmware is doing as well is when the flash gets to a point where it's too slow to deal with, that's when it gets retired. So I think the drives are being fairly proactive about avoiding situations where they're spending too long trying to write to unreliable cells.
So I guess is there anything else to say about the experiment proper in this current update? I think there are a few questions that we have about it from the chat and from some of our readers, but is there anything that you said here in this, here's the conclusion, that we're missing first?
No, I think it's I don't know which one is going to last the longest at this point. The HyperX seems to be on this incredible lucky streak, and I wouldn't bet against it based on how long it's lasted so far, but it does seem like the 840 Pro is probably going to last longer. So
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. I'm at this point contemplating what to do with the drives at this point. I feel like they should get some sort of Viking funeral at the end or something. But
that would be fun. Yeah, and it's really at this point, if we took wagers on that well, we shouldn't, but it would be fun. The question that seems to be on everybody's mind is like one of two things: are you going to do this again? Can you do it with the latest SSDs so that you'll be a year out of date when you find out about those? because that's what I want to buy now. Or can you next time test with like 5 of the same drive? And that all has to do with what happens next. And Jeff, I don't know what happens next. What do you think?
You know, there's a lot of different things that we could do with it. I mean, part of it, I'm seeing some comments that, you know, it's not necessary to do another one because we've sort of proven something at this point. But one of the things that doesn't really take into account is the fact that the manufacturing nodes for the flash memory are shrinking, which actually makes the cells weaker. So theoretically, the smaller these cells get, the lower the endurance of the flash. Now, it may not actually decrease enough to make a difference for normal workloads, especially for sort of consumer or client-oriented stuff. But Flash is not going to be getting stronger unless you move into these sort of 3D structures, which seem to be more robust. So we're kind of at a weird, just before maybe an inflection point before there's a mass transition from planar stuff, which will be becoming less reliable theoretically, and the 3D stuff, which seems to at least so far be more reliable. So it might not actually be entirely viable to test something like an 850 Pro. Until all of its flash dies, because it's simply, or at least according to the performance or the endurance specifications, supposed to be a lot more robust than the drives that we've tested so far. So, you know, there are reasons to do another endurance experiment, and there are a lot of good options for, you know, doing a lot of different drives to see how they fail differently and how they age differently and how easy it is to monitor drives from different manufacturers. And then there's also a case to be made for testing multiples of different drives to get a sense of, you know, how much variance there is within a given family. And then there's the sort of traditional tech report doing way more than is necessary, where you get a whole bunch of samples of a whole bunch of drives, but that might be a little outside the realm of what's realistic to do. So we'll see. I think probably it's best to finish this experiment off first and think about what to do for the next round, because there's especially when you start adding more and more drives, this is going to get more and more complicated, and it's going to take a long time. So I've got to try to think about ways to maybe accelerate things for the drives, which may sacrifice having them all being tested in exactly the same way on exactly the same timeline, but it may give us results a little more quickly.
You're gonna like beat them with a broomstick while the test runs, and how do you?
Well, I mean, you can do. We chose the workload we used because we were able to very clearly write a specific amount of data to drives over a certain period of time. But there are options to use other programs that will generate data at a higher rate, but isn't as easy to say only write 200 terabytes and then stop.
Wow.
So we could, I mean, if we don't actually want to have a race where each drive is neck and neck the whole time, I think there are some options for getting through things quickly, but it sort of depends on how many drives we want to do and how much performance testing we want to do at regular intervals.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on record.
I think what we've learned is we can scale back maybe a little bit on some of the testing that we've been doing.
I'm gonna go on record and say I'm really a skeptic about doing this again, because I don't think that people are going to be dying to read about the second iteration of this, unless there's something interesting and new and different. If we have a different angle, maybe. But otherwise, I don't know what we're learning, because we're almost certainly not going to have enough samples to learn about like differences between brands or controller types or flash types or any of that. Yeah. So I don't know, man. We'll think about it though. I just
we need Google or someone who is using thousands of SSDs to release some numbers.
Right, like the backblaze
and the random failures, which is really a bigger problem. Just sort of SSDs that up and die for no particular reason, not wear related at all.
Yeah, well, we've all encountered that, right?
Yeah,
yeah. That's way worse than I can't wear them out if they die before I can wear them out. So yeah, that's way worse. Anyway, okay, well. Maybe if you're listening or watching and you really want us to do another one of these, explain why we should do this again, what's different or better about doing again, and it's not going to be the difference between flash types. It's got to be better than that.
It's gonna end up
Actually,
being test my SSD.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's actually interesting that Scott's been running an experiment for. Well, I think it varies depending on the subject. But Scott, you've been running experiment for what, 8 years to see how long you can push Jeff and Cyril before they burn out. I mean, what's the?
We've had a few uncorrected errors, but
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. For the most part, there's still
8 frickin' years in running.
Yeah. Jeff has been around longer than that, man.
Longer than that.
Yeah.
Longer than that. I'm just guessing at the number. At
And
this
we're
point.
we're overclocking all of our editors on various
On your stream.
deadlines. Yeah.
It's nuts. It's really nuts. Scott, this next story is yours. Thanksgiving offers a perfect chance to crack open a busted iPad Air. What happened? Who broke the Air, man?
My brother broke his iPad Air. In fact, this was the deal. He had it sitting. It was like sitting on a desk in a case thing that like kind of grips it by the corners, and it just flipped forward, and it was on a table or something, and when it flipped forward, the screen shattered. And it was not the Apple case, and it didn't really securely hold the thing, and so when it flipped, the glass hit the table surface and it shattered. And so he called me and said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, you take it to a place that repairs the screen." But I thought about it a little later, and I called him back. We were getting together for Thanksgiving, and I said, "You can buy the screen, and I can put it on." I've been kind of wanting to go. I've worked on a few little things like this, and been kind of wanting to go further down the path of how do I get into a tablet and work on it, and then get back out and have it better off for that. And that's a skill that I just wanted to have because I feel like I should be able to fix stuff because I work on bigger computers, and I kind of this blog post sort of recounts the story of trying to do this. And Jordan, I don't know, have you ever done anything like worked on a tablet or a phone or anything that small?
Not personally. I've seen phones being taken apart by the sort of rent-a-cop phone repair dudes that you see. There's a few in New York City that will come to you. You just call them up and you pick a neutral location like a Starbucks, and they bring a kit in their backpack, and they'll do battery replacement, screen replacement, all sorts of things. Well, that before, but I've never done one myself.
Okay. Well, the weird thing about it for me is the glue, right? The screen is glued onto the case, and you have to heat it up with a heat gun or hair dryer or something like that. In this case, it was a hair dryer, and then you have to get something under, like in between the glass screen and the case. And in this case, it was a guitar pick, which I started with a little teeny metal screwdriver and pried it up once I had the glue heated up, and then I had to sort of, while heating around the edges, use a guitar pick to basically cut through the adhesive all the way around it to where you could get the screen off. And the thing about that is, like, there are YouTube videos on how to do this. It's not something that is like really, really difficult, but they're like usually just using a completely whole glass pane that they're taking off. This was shattered, man. I had a shattered screen, and so I start doing this, and the the big pieces I can get them off, but then the little like shattered portions, I'm like peeling them up,
Yikes.
peeling the adhesive up, peeling the shattered portions up, and then like it's shattering further, and glass dust is falling out as I do this, falling into the chassis of the iPad and onto the LCD screen beneath the glass coating. And so, like, my brother's awesome iPad Air LCD Retina display has this like sticky, gooey surface, and then on top of it are shards and splinters of glass in innumerable numbers. And so that was pretty harrowing, and it took, I think it took over an hour maybe to get everything pried off without ruining anything. And then I tell this story. I went through this like series of kind of ups and downs as I thought that I was on the right track, and then we got the new screen and digitizer there, and it turns out it didn't have a home button with it. It didn't have the little like bracket that you need at the top for the the camera, and so I had to go to the broken screen and detach those and then transfer them to the new one. And I'm doing this like at this rental house that we rented for Thanksgiving. My whole family got together at this lake house, and I have no like extra adhesive, no vacuum cleaner tools, no like compressed air, nothing. And I'm trying to do this, and it was just really hard. And basically this is the end of the story, Jordan. After like 3 hours of struggle, I got everything done. I pushed through all of the obstacles. I did everything the way it should be. I used the instructions from the repair kit and a couple of YouTube videos, and I pressed that iPad Air back together, and all the glue took and it held and it looked like new. And even the glass shards I've been able to remove from the surface of the LCD to the point where when you turned it on it looked right. I had already tested the screen, the touch screen and the LCD before I put it all back together, so I knew it worked right. And I cleaned it up and I turned it on, and it was beautiful. And I went to log in and I swiped, and the swipe didn't take.
Ooh.
And I swiped again and it kind of took, but then I get logged in and like there's just random touches all over the screen all the time, just typing and selecting things, and Lord knows what it's going to do, and you had to lock it before it just starts sending weird emails from my brother's account. It was ruined, it didn't work, and it was glued back together again, and it failed. And at that point, I about had like a violent reaction to this reality. But the end of it, after I thought about it some, was basically I'm pretty certain what happened is the adhesive that I peeled off of the screen all the way around, beneath the glass screen was basically like felt with adhesive on both sides. So it isolated the touch screen, which works on basically electrostatic principles, from the chassis, which is the electrically conductive metal chassis. And the kit that we ordered for the screen repair had just glue strips basically that you put in the place of that adhesive, and so it did not insulate the screen from the chassis. And so I think that's why there are random touches all over the place. And so it was defeat. It was complete and utter defeat. Like I did not win that encounter. The only good news is I didn't really ruin the thing, and I'm pretty sure my brother can take it to a repair place now and have them do it right, and it will be okay. And they might be able to use even the same digitizer as long as they put some different adhesive and maybe some insulating tape around the perimeter of the screen when they put it back on. But working on that stuff is not fun. I love building PCs, but this is not like that. This is like, this object was designed to be thin and cheap to make and durable and a lot of things, but it's basically almost actively hostile to the person who might want to repair it. Like, it's not designed for that. And I'm just not excited about doing this again, like I would be if I built a computer for a buddy or something like that. So I don't know. That was lesson learned.
Lesson learned, man. Yeah.
I don't know. Jeff and Cyril, have you guys ever done any of that type of repair? The phones and tablets?
Years. No, I've taken old phones, but no, not new ones. I'm too chicken to try.
Yeah, I usually only if stuff gets busted already would I even try it. But I don't know, man. I keep thinking I'm going to be good at this at some point if I keep doing it, and maybe I will. But so far, it's not been a good thing for the devices that I've worked on.
Well, the devices are not getting any easier to repair either.
Well, the miniaturization continues. I don't know. I saw iFixit or somebody had to tear down the iPhone 6. It's got two little screws, and the screen popped out, and it looked really great. Like, they gave it a pretty good rating. So I'm not sure that it's universally the case that they're all getting worse. But it is the case that as we miniaturize further, that there are a lot of opportunities for it to get worse. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Jordan, if your new iPad mini breaks, then take it to somebody who isn't
Yeah,
me.
I won't send it to you,
Yeah.
Scott. Next story here is TR's 2014 Christmas gift guide, and this is really cool because we've taken some of the top tech picks from Scott Wasson, all the real important people in the tech report: Scott Wasson, Jeff Gager, Cyril Kowalski, Jeffrey Campman, Bruno's the web guy, Adam, he's the ad guy, and
And not Jordan. Dude, did you want to contribute to the gift guide? Jeff, it's all Jeff's fault.
It's all me.
He coordinated this. I'm totally throwing this at him.
All right, Jordan, which movies do you think people should buy this year?
all of them. I will say, because none of the people who would actually be receiving this gift will be listening to the podcast, I've already bought my big gift this year for all my friends. I bought, for better or for worse, 8 little tiles. Those little Wi-Fi enabled, Bluetooth enabled devices that you attach to your gadgets and your keys and your stuff so that your phone can find them within 100 feet. So if you put on your key ring and your phone will direct you to where the tile is. You put it on anything you feel like you're going to lose often. And I was going to do it for a few close family members. And I had this thing where the more you buy, the cheaper they are. And so I decided to buy 8 and just give them to a few close friends and family as my holiday gift.
Have you tried it yourself yet?
No. So if it fails miserably, then oh well. But it's gotten good reviews from what I can tell. So gonna see how that goes. Anyway, so let's talk about the other more important people on the podcast, or excuse me, the website. Not gonna hold any grudges or anything. Damn you to hell. Scott, you're up first, and you have a pretty straightforward. These aren't a huge surprise.
No, and initially my list was like 3 or 4 cheap things that I kind of would recommend, but Jeff said we had to have 3, and I was like, well, I have to do the PC hardware because I'm like the guy who does these types of reviews of these particular categories, and there's significant new products this year. So this is what we got. So actually, it's really good because my first pick is the Asus ROG Swift PG278Q G-Sync monitor, which we talked about earlier, is the best gaming display I've ever seen in my life. It's awesome. It costs a lot of money. It costs too much money probably, but it's maybe too awesome also. And it is a TN panel, but it's gorgeous. And if you have the means, it'd be a great thing to buy. One of the hardest problems about this one, Jordan, is they keep selling out. It's been on the market for months and they still don't have enough. So I think the demand is just really high. But that's an easy pick. You can read my review, which is linked in the article, and I don't know. It's 144 hertz plus variable refresh, 2560 by 1440, good color reproduction, super fast and smooth. So easy.
Nice. Good pick.
And the next thing is a video card to go with it. I picked a GeForce GTX 970 card that is very similar. I was going to pick the MSI, which is I did a little roundup at 970s, and the MSI was the best one I tested, and it was really a great product. But MSI changed to a gold edition that costs $50 more and is almost the same for no apparent reason. Maybe just because there's a lot of demand for these too, and so it was kind of a price hike. Anyway, it's unfortunate, but this Gigabyte card I picked is a great substitution that actually has 3 DisplayPort outputs, so I think in theory it would run 3 G-Sync displays, which the MSI cannot do. You have to buy a 980 in order to get that otherwise. I think. There aren't many 970s with 3 display ports. Anyway, this one has it. It's a good pick. And, the GTX 970 is the more affordable of the 2 bigger Maxwell video cards out now. The 980 is nice, but you don't need to pay the extra for it in order to drive the 2560 by 1440 resolution in most games. And so I don't see the point in spending more if you don't have to, so that's my pick there. And then the last one is the Nexus 7 tablet, the 2013, which is... I had some interesting feedback on the comments on this, because people were kind of saying, well, surely it's been around for a while, there are better tablets out now. You know, not really. There are, in the sense that, like, the Shield tablet is out, and Jeff wrecked that, and he's going to talk about it, and it's a great tablet. But this is now $169. I saw a thing the other day where it was $150, and it's a quad-core crate Snapdragon processor. It's kind of weird because it's got a 600 series Snapdragon model number in the SoC, but the SoC is really basically a downclocked Snapdragon 801, I believe. It's the newer CPU architecture and pretty good GPU, and you know, I've had the thing for what, over a year now, and yeah, over a year now, and it still feels really fast and snappy. It's a great way to read books, check the web. Just if I'm on the couch or goofing off or whatever, then the Nexus 7 is sitting near me, and I can't believe how good it is for this price. The display is 1920 by 1200, very well calibrated IPS. It's better than the Shield tablet display. In fact, I prefer using the Nexus 7 over the Shield tablet when I'm not playing games that don't require the extra horsepower. It's, I don't know. The smaller size is nice for just, I don't know. So there you go. That's a terrible admission because it's not nearly as fast. You can benchmark it. It's clearly not, but it just works really well. So that's my pick, and I think I don't know what else you would, other than the iPad Mini, which is also great. I don't know what else you would throw in the category with this. I don't like Samsung's TouchWiz. I don't feel like that there are other competitors that are better. So, Jeff, I don't know. Tell us about your pick so we can talk about the Shield tablet. I like it, but it's a little bit different class of product.
Yeah, I mean, I like it as a tablet, but it's really about what it does that's more than a tablet. It's about the fact that you're getting the Tegra chip with the better GPU, the better gaming performance, and then all of this kind of game stream that you can do either from local GeForce PCs, which actually works very well. So if you don't have, let's say, a PC in a living room, or you want to play your PC games in a room where you don't have a system, you can play game streaming over, if you have a reasonably fast, even Wi-Fi network, it works reasonably well. You can play games on the tablet screen, or you can port them to a big screen TV over the HDMI output and sort of turn the tablet into a virtual console. You really need the optional controller to make that work, but the controller is excellent. You can get it working with a PC now, and I'm hoping they make a native PC version because it's got a nice touchpad integrated, so when you're playing these games that weren't necessarily designed for controller input, you can sort of get around some of the PC-specific menus a little easier than you might even be able to do with something like an Xbox controller. So it does have that extra sort of gaming boost that you don't get with a lot of tablets, and it has a lot of smart decisions for a tablet itself. It's got a micro SD slot, which means you can pop in up to 128 gigs of external storage relatively cheaply compared to buying a higher capacity tablet from the outset. And it's also got an integrated stylus, which has become better. The palm rejection algorithms are still not good enough that I would say it's something you want to use all the time. But the ability to just pop a stylus out of the chassis and use Nvidia's Dabbler application, which is actually a fairly nice sort of painting, doodling application. It's a nice extra capability to have in a tablet, and something that does make sense for a slate like this. So I like it as a tablet for someone who doesn't want the Nexus 7. I think the Nexus 7 is great. I'd recommend it, especially at the $150. The Shield tablet is twice that price for the 16 gig version, and then there's an unlocked 4G version that has 32 gigs of memory instead of 16, and that one costs $400. So not cheap. But if you're looking for something a little nicer than the Nexus 7 that can do a few things that the Nexus 7 can't do, I think the Shield tablet is a good option.
Yeah, it's nice, and Nvidia's working on getting games ported to it. They've got older PC games, Portal, Half-Life 2, Half-Life 2 Episode 1, I think, just came out.
Yep.
And, you know, if you have, like, a reason why you need to or you want to do that, play that type of game mobile with a touchpad, then it can be fun. It is a little weird to me because as a PC gamer playing FPSs with the touchpad, like, or not a touchpad, but a gamepad, like, I can't do that. Like, I need other game genres for that. But yeah, and it is like the benchmarks tell the story there, but it is really fast in terms of mobile CPUs, mobile graphics, SoCs. It's a significant mobile SoC from that standpoint. And Nvidia's done great with they got the Lollipop update out, and the Nexus 7's still waiting for the Lollipop update for the OTA. I didn't get it on mine yet. Did you get it on yours?
I don't have a 2000.
Oh, you don't have it. Oh, you don't. Okay.
Although the 2012 has it already.
You did get Lollipop. I think a lot of people have, but I haven't, and I did on the Shield tablet already. So that's another plus. It's pretty much pure Android, and they update it quickly, so it's like the Nexus devices in that way. Your other pick was the Corsair K70 keyboard, which is another obvious one, maybe.
Just best mechanical keyboard around. Just
what?
It's the
I
best.
didn't know you guys were into that.
Keyboard. It's got sort of the smart, it doesn't go overboard with all these macro keys and a whole bunch of extra stuff that makes the footprint really large. It has sort of a standard layout. They've added a few media keys that are dedicated, so you don't have to use function shortcuts to get at them.
Cyril
roller on the side.
Cyril has reviewed a lot of keyboards for us. I want to hear, does he agree with the assessment that this is the best mechanical keyboard around?
You know, I haven't actually tried the K70, but I did try I think it's the K60, which is the same thing, just with rubber dome switches under the F keys and the paging block, I think. And it's a really good keyboard. I mean, I love the volume knob and the kind of the build, like the aluminum backplate. I think, yeah, I mean, I picked a different one for my side of the guide, but it's it is a very nice keyboard.
All right.
Well, the thing with this is it's available in, I don't even know how many different flavors. You can get it with a bunch of different switch types, and then they've got the new RGB versions that have a bazillion color options for the lighting with all sorts of programming options. And then even on top of that, I think the RGB versions you can get with the old Corsair logo and then with their new kind of weird tramp stamp kind of Corsair gaming logo. So there's a whole bunch of options for if you want to sort of pick one that matches someone's personal preferences, which is a lot of what keyboards are, especially when it comes down to switch type.
I should have never said that thing about the tramp stamp in the chat room. It's going to leak out on the podcast if you do, but anyway.
Any other ones from you, Cyril? Oh, let's see. You picked...
Wait, did we look at the Chromecast?
Jeff picked that.
Yeah. If you don't have a Chromecast already, it's been out forever. It's the easiest way to get something from your phone or tablet onto your television, and even better, it's the easiest way to get something from someone else's phone or tablet onto your television.
You know, it's funny. I've not really played around with the Chromecast. I've used Apple TV a ton, and I like it for the AirPlay thing, but I really haven't wrapped my head around what Chromecast could offer.
It's basically, I mean, I use it mostly for YouTube, and it's, you just, instead of hitting a button to full screen something, you hit a button on the YouTube display and it puts it on your television. There's a lot of it you can screen Netflix.
Is it only with Android devices, or does that work with iPhone too?
No, it works with my wife's iPhone, so.
Yeah, it works really well with iPhones and iPads and all that stuff, so.
Well, hold. Your wife?
Yep.
Yeah.
When did you get married?
Like August, Labor Day long weekend.
Did we not?
He pretty much.
We did not live stream the ceremony.
He was very low
Scott
key about
offered.
it.
Let's be clear. Congratulations, dude.
Thanks.
Let's all have a moment. Hold on. Seriously, like, You know, first you don't let me add to the gift guide, and now you just got married. You don't even ask if like what my opinion is or anything like that. Like, jeez.
You didn't get the invitation?
Yeah, no, I didn't get the invitation. Gosh.
Well, let's talk about other people's picks.
Moving
Cyril
on.
picked the PlayStation 4. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Well, yeah, we should talk about that pick because that's great. But let's let him talk about his keyboard, which is this is his pick for the best mechanical keyboard.
Well, it's not, you know. All right, Jordan.
Go ahead,
Listen, if
sorry.
you're not going to be cooperative, why don't you just?
Oh,
Scott, just
well,
replace this picture
oh
with the
no!
key again.
The jump is back.
Whoa! I take it back.
All right. No, you know it's not the best keyboard ever, but it's the best one I've reviewed. This the one I'm using now. You know, it's a 10 kilo, so you don't have the numpad in the way, so you can mouse a little bit closer to the like you without sort of holding your arm out too far to the side, which is more comfortable. And it has these really nice topre sort of switches, which are electrostatic capacitive, so they feel very they feel kind of, it's like a combination of, you know, mechanical and rubber dome, and it just feels very nice. And but it has the same sort of build, the same sort of layout in terms of like the size of the keycaps and how they're positioned as, you know, Cherry MX keyboards, which are very comfortable. So it's kind of like a best of both worlds deal. Yeah, it's not, you know, it's not the perfect keyboard. Like I wish the media keys, I mean the media shortcuts, like it's you know, there's a function key and you can use the F keys to like control audio playback and that sort of stuff. I wish they were positioned better, but you know, aside from that, it's a very nice keyboard. The only downside is the price, which is about $180, which is fairly expensive, but you know, again, really premium, high quality keyboard.
And so, let's talk about the PlayStation pick because I don't want to avoid this any longer. So this was the single most smart alecky way that you could do this. You actually made this a pick in a guide for gifts.
Well, I was out of ideas. I didn't know what to pick for the third one, so I figured,
Did you actually? I'm assuming this is based on your hands-on experience with it.
Yeah, I bought one. Mostly to play racing games, but you know the PlayStation also has, you know, these kind of nice little indie games that are exclusives, and it's gonna have No Man's First, which I want to play that. But mostly I bought it to play like racing games with my girlfriend, and also because I was curious.
So you haven't
I mean,
married her yet? Let's just be clear. 'Cause
No,
I mean,
I have. I'll be sure to send you an invitation, Jordan.
Thank you.
I don't want to repeat
I'm not going
it.
to come, but I at least want to know I was invited.
All right.
I'll buy you some placemats or something for your freaking registry. I'm just so done.
Yeah, but one of the reasons. All right. Jeez.
I love you, Jeff. All right, go ahead, Cyril. Sorry. One of the reasons that you shitted on the you crapped on the PS4.
And there we go again. No, one of the reasons I bought it is because I wanted to see what it's like. You know, we mostly focus on the PC. We sort of have these next gen consoles that have very PC-like hardware in them, and it's interesting to see the contrast with something that's fairly similar to what's under the hood, but the software and the build is very different. And it turns out that there are some downsides that sort of get overlooked. People talk a lot about the fact that you have to pay a subscription to get multiplayer, and the sort of closed nature. You can't really mod your games and that sort of stuff. But I think that the biggest thing for me, like the most surprising thing, was like how few games there are, because it only runs PS4 games, and there's like a streaming thing where you can play older games. I haven't really tried that yet, but you have to pay. You can't. I think you have to pay per hour or something, or I'm not exactly sure, but it's streamed. It's not running natively on the device, so you need a fast internet connection and that sort of thing. But yeah, it doesn't have that many games. Whereas if you're gaming on a PC, you have this whole library of titles stretching back to like the DOS days, if you have the right sort of software to run them. With a PS4, you have this very small library of titles. You know, you have some nice indie games, you have some PS3 ports, but it's kind of, you know, you pay $400 for a device, and then you can't really play that much stuff on it. It's kind of disappointing. The you know, there's the, you know, obviously there's like the 30 frames per second cap, and that's kind of not that great. But at the same time, you know, it does. Because it's constant and because it's like synchronized with the TV's refresh rate, it definitely doesn't feel like 30 frames per second on the PC. 30 frames per second on the PC is unplayable. On a console, it's, you know, it doesn't feel quite as responsive as it could, but it's smooth enough that you can sort of have a good time.
There's a difference between one 30 FPS frame time distribution and another.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
An FPS by itself doesn't tell you. So
yeah, of course. And one other thing that I don't like is the noise. Obviously, it's kind of a loud device, and they have this little sort of laptop style cooler. It's actually the inside of the console is very elegantly designed, but they went for like, they tried to make it as small and compact as possible. So it doesn't actually have that hole in there to dissipate the heat, so the fan has to spin up pretty loudly, and you definitely hear it over games, even like, you know, if you're, you know, a few feet away from the TV. So it's, you know, it's not it's not a great experience is the main thing. It's kind of, you know, there's little rough edges everywhere, and sometimes the PlayStation Store doesn't load, and it's, you know, and this is the best console of the current generation, so it's kind of, as a PC gamer, you would expect it, but I was definitely interested to see what it's really like. And, you know, it's not just, we're not just, you know, posturing, and this is not just like, you know, PC master race bluster. It really is not that great.
I guess we didn't really set this up right, because we didn't really explain that the recommendation basically is framed this way: you want to spend a few hours or a few days with the PlayStation 4, so that you can appreciate how much better your PC is than this thing.
Right.
So the recommendation is not really to buy a PlayStation 4, but just to get one and get some exposure to it, so that you can then appreciate how much better a PC with Steam is. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what it did for me.
Yeah.
You know, obviously you can like resell it or just like use a friend's or something. You shouldn't, you know, spend $400 for this sort of thing.
Painful,
and it was a facetious recommendation, but yeah, but it, you know, it definitely puts things in perspective in a kind of nice way.
So when you sell yours and build a home theater PC, let me recommend, Sega has this Sonic and All-Stars Racing game that's on Steam for like $15, that is like basically a sort of a Mario Kart done better type of thing. Really good racing game that you could play with your girlfriend or wife if you decide to marry her and not tell us. And also the Codemaster stuff does split screen on the PC, so you can play head to head with up to 4 people on Dirt and Grid and all those. Dirt Showdown is very arcadey and is a good like party game, because people can pick it up and play and learn to sort of drift and slide and pretty quickly be competitive in it. And all you need is wireless Xbox controllers and a Windows adapter, and you're good to go. So just a little, you know, if you decide to make a better choice. And the Steam Big Picture stuff is not bad. It could be better. But the trick with that is you kind of have to have like a little touchpad keyboard combo in your living room to get it all set up. Once it's set up, then you can use Big Picture to launch games. But occasionally, if you're like me and there's always a new game being installed, you're going to want a touchpad thing. But
well, and sometimes you got to go through Uplay or some other third party. That's got to be the most annoying thing for me for Big Picture mode, is getting dumped out of it into someone else's DRM scheme that I then have to input a password in.
Ubisoft.
Yeah. It's mostly Ubisoft.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's like, hey, I'm going to play some Assassin's Creed on my TV, and now I'm enraged. Yeah. but it's still you can navigate through that stuff, and it's not that bad, and it is getting better too, because big picture is a consideration for game developers now, and so a lot of them are paying attention. The ones who pay attention, not necessarily Ubisoft, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to see the rest of our holiday picks, including picks from Adam Iberger, Jeffrey Campman, and Bruno Ferraria.
Ferreira. Jeez, dude.
You are certainly welcome to head over to our website. If you expect that we're going to read them to you, because somehow you can't do that for yourself, you're sadly mistaken. Who exactly do you think you are? Next story here, Trend Force predicts tablet slump and laptop growth for 2015. Are tablets going to be the ePCs? Like, everyone's really into them for a while, but then they sort of lose their relevance?
Well, I put this story in for us to talk about mainly because I think it's hilarious, because for a while, PCs were dying, right? And mobile was taking over. Tablets are going to kill them. And then the narrative shifted, and we talk about the narrative shifting to, well, people kind of want like a laptop or desktop for productivity, and then they seem to like phablets for, just sort of the when they're not working consumption stuff now. And this like firm is now predicting a slump in tablet sales for 2015, laptop growth, and they're saying there's a problem with the future of tablets because of phablets and laptops and desktops, and it's hilarious to me that these things change like that. I don't think this makes any sense from the standpoint that, like, I could see tablets slumping because people aren't going to upgrade this cycle. Like, those things happen. But the idea that tablets don't have a place anymore doesn't make a lot of sense. I bought an iPhone 6 Plus. I think it's great. And I still pick up the Nexus 7 all the time just for the difference in screen size. It's not that big, but it's big enough difference. And when tablets are that cheap, when computing is $150 or something as good as a Nexus 7 and going down in price all the time, I don't think there are a lot of either or questions you have to ask about these things anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things with tablets as well is that they're a lot like PCs in the sense that you don't really need to upgrade them like a phone like every 2 years. Like, an older iPad is still fine. It doesn't have to be like extra thin and extra light. You're using it on the couch. It doesn't matter if it's years old and it doesn't have, it's not quite as fast, and it can't run like the latest Infinity Blade, with all the detail turned up or whatever. It's just you're using it to surf the internet. So, people probably have tablets already, and they're just happy with the ones they have, and they don't necessarily want to spend, $200, $300, $400 to get like a slightly better version of the same thing that they already have.
Right, and that's a very different thing from saying people don't find tablets useful anymore,
right?
And they're going to want something better eventually. It just means it's a maturing, market, which, that happens. It happened to the PC. It's okay. It's a huge freaking market that's vibrant. It's just mature. It's okay.
Yeah, and the slump that TrendForce is talking about is like, what is it, 3.5%? It's a percent decline, and they're still going to sell almost 200 million units. So it's not like people have stopped buying tablets and they're not going to buy tablets anymore. It's just slightly less. They're going to buy slightly fewer than last year.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah. And they could be wrong. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is an interesting prediction, though. I think it's fun how the winds shift, and I'm curious to see how long it is before the PC is going to die again. Maybe a decade or so, and then we'll hear about the whole thing again. Maybe less.
I mean, next year looks pretty good for the PC. You're going to have Broadwell, Skylake, Windows 10, which Windows 10 is actually going to be compelling, unlike Windows 8. So yeah, it does make sense that there's going to be an increase there.
Yeah, and the Core M stuff is probably going to eat into some tablet sales. I'm my next thing that I want to do, and of course my laptop is older than dirt, but I want to get a new laptop. I don't want to get a new tablet. And there are really compelling choices out there with the Core M and fanlessness. And honestly, my next big tablet may be a convertible laptop. Although Windows Touch has to get a lot better, or I have to like get a little lobotomy or something for that to happen. I don't know.
It just ain't better.
Internet Explorer.
I love Internet Explorer now. I don't know.
I want to just take that clip and just turn that into a soundboard. I love Internet Explorer now. So I'm gonna skip this G-Sync story and talk about, Jeff, your experience gaming on the grid with Nvidia's Shield tablet. Now, this is the idea, of course, that you could stream a game off your PC onto the Nvidia Shield tablet so that your PC's handling the majority of the processing workload and streaming the game to your sort of wireless device. It's
not exactly.
No?
No, the Shield has two streaming, so that would be, I think that's technically called game stream, where you're streaming from your own PC. What Grid is basically a cloud-based game streaming service where Nvidia has servers equipped with GeForce graphics cards, or
what am I
probably
thinking
their
of?
own Tesla stuff. So this is kind of like OnLive, where you're streaming something over the internet.
I'm sorry.
And it's kind of bound by all of the same. I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate thing. The in-home streaming works really quite well on Shield, especially if you have a fast enough internet connection. But when you go over the Grid service, you get worse graphics, and the latency is even. I mean, technically I'm testing it from a location that's outside of the officially supported Grid area. I don't know if that's just because I'm in Canada or what the deal is with that. But they are supposed to have servers in San Jose, which is really, from an internet perspective, not that far from Vancouver. And I had low ping times. All of my network specs are sort of within the requirements. But the latency is still, it's noticeable. I'm particularly sensitive to it, I think, because I tend to prefer more action-oriented games, especially driving games where, anything that has consistent motion, if there's even a slight interruption, even if it doesn't sort of screw up the game, it does remind you that you're playing a streaming title rather than something that's native. And it kind of tainted the whole experience for me. It's impressive that they can do this, but in terms of replacing native gameplay or streaming from a local source, they've got a long way to go. And Grid also has kind of a library problem right now, where if you look at OnLive or PlayStation's equivalent service, OnLive has a couple hundred titles, I think. PlayStation is over 100. I think to date, Grid is maybe only up to 24 games. They've pledged to add new games every week, and they are doing that. But it still has a long way to go from reaching the kind of bill it as a Netflix for games. So to come anything close to what you would regard as a Netflix-like selection, they've got to add quite a few titles to the catalog, and a lot of newer stuff, because most of the games are sort of 3 to 4 years old that are listed on Grid. So it's kind of, the selection is not great, the experience is not great. It's kind of this cool capability that would maybe be awesome if you had Google Fiber and could sort of really crank up all the detail. But I think for most people with their most internet connections, I don't think it's that great of an experience right now.
Unfortunate.
It is. I mean, they've nailed the software side of it, I think, at least. Getting into a game is very easy. They've got sort of provisions for where the keyboard, where a sort of a PC game wants keyboard controls. They've done a good job of mapping things to their controller. It's just, there's not much you can do about, network latency. People complain about, lag when they're playing a game. Multiplayer game online. They think about streaming the entire game experience from a server. It's just a difficult problem to solve.
Now, how often did you run into problems? It wasn't like constant, was it?
It wasn't constant, but it was, if I was playing Grid, at least once per lap, there would be some sort of visual or noticeable hitch, and it wouldn't necessarily make me crash or screw me up, but it was there.
Right. And I think that's an important point, because there's a difference between I had intermittent problems and I didn't like that, and this is every single frame too slow for me to interact with the game and enjoy it. And it turns out that if you're not having problems, it's surprisingly not that bad during those. Like if you didn't have the intermittent lag, right?
Yeah, I mean, the graphics quality is not great. It's kind of this YouTube
Yeah.
graphics. The default resolution is, I think, 720p, and they pile on a whole bunch of anti-aliasing, but it clearly you see the video compression in action. So, I mean, you can play games, and on slower pace games, it works a lot better. And I was still able to pull off, combos and stuff in Batman Combat and even a few headshots. I mean, I was more hindered by using a controller, I think, than by lag when I was playing Borderlands. But there's enough of a reminder that you're streaming games that, I mean, maybe I'm just spoiled probably by playing games locally and having experienced the much better local streaming, which is not really affected at all by any latency issues. So in that respect, I think it's as good of a streaming service that I've used from an experience perspective, but even if you have that, they've got to beef up the game catalog before this becomes sort of a viable competitor, I think, to OnLive or PlayStation. But it's free until I think June 30th next year for anybody with a Shield device. So this is something that they're not charging for yet. They haven't announced pricing, and there's a free preview out right now for people with compatible devices. I guess probably to work out the kinks.
Yeah. See, and to me, I played with it too. I've got a similar situation in terms of internet connection. I don't know that we're in the supported area, but have good ping times. And honestly, I have fewer of those lag hiccup moments than you, I think. Although I haven't spent a lot of hours playing with it. My thing with it is it depends on the game type, whether I'm willing to handle the sort of momentary constant lag. And it also depends on the internet congestion in terms of the image quality. Like sometimes it's pretty good and sometimes it's less so. Were you projecting it onto a big screen or were you running on the Shield tablet screen?
I did both.
Because on the Shield tablet screen,
found,
it's more forgiving.
Yeah, it is. It's more forgiving. I actually found also what bugged me most was I actually found my TV was more forgiving than watching the videos later. I recorded a bunch of gameplay sessions, and watching those on my desktop monitor, which is a 24-inch monitor that I'm sitting fairly close to, I noticed a lot more of the flaws than I did when I was, playing on the tablet screen, which is fairly small. And even sort of from across the room for my big screen TV, because I think the distance with that sort of hid some of the visual flaws that become quite apparent when you're looking at sort of a 24-inch monitor from a couple of feet away.
Yeah. I could see that. I had to say, though, I mean, it wasn't too bad when I played. The thing about it, I was going to say that for me that matters the most is you have to find the right game. I can imagine like a Diablo 3 with a controller if you decide you wanted to play it that way. Something along those lines where it's not super fast action. It doesn't require you to immediately have the timing right on everything in order to win. That could be fine. I don't want to do a platformer where I have to time the jumps perfectly, and driving games are no. I thought, hey, that would be great. I'll do that, and then I drove off the road a lot, and because it's just not quite quick enough, frame to frame for that. But I think certain types of games, it could work well, and it's surprisingly good, considering how skeptical I was going in. But yeah, it is going to depend a lot on your local internet connection and the connectivity between your servers and them. So I don't know. Jeff, this isn't going to replace my home gaming PCs, which are awesome, just like you. I'd really rather do that. But it is an interesting question whether this can be good enough to replace that, like the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which are going to be, maybe 1080p, maybe not, and image quality settings aren't going to be super high, and the frame rates aren't necessarily all that great. And in some cases, with the prior generation consoles, when they really pushed on performance and effects and all that stuff, they got a pretty high amount of latency between controller input and what comes back, just as a matter of course on those consoles when you play games on them. And I think that you might be able to deliver a better experience if you have a really powerful server with a fast CPU and GPU remotely than you can with a more compromised local console experience. So that's the part of it that fascinates me is how this becomes maybe an alternative to traditional consoles, which we already talked about, I think, last time, how traditional consoles are probably in a world of hurt in the next 5 years. This is another reason, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, guys, I think that brings us to the end.
I think you're right.
I think I am. Jeff, what are you working on coming up?
I actually can't talk about the next couple of things I'm working on.
Excellent. So I'll probably
That's pretty much always the case when Jordan asks.
always
Yeah.
the case. It's
But thank you for asking.
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess the last time I asked that, one of the items that you weren't willing to talk about was you getting married. Cyril, what are you working on? Proposing or what's that?
I don't want to talk about what I have coming up.
What?
No, I'm.
What?
Wow. All right.
Wow.
Boy, you could just give me the finger now and save us all the time. Scott, what about you?
Nah, come on. Hey,
I think you missed
I'm
your
actually
chance.
reviewing, Jordan, if you will give me the time to. No, I'm reviewing a case, which is Cooler Masters Silencio 625S, which I'm waiting on a fan because like there was something wrong during shipping and one of the fans came apart, like the actual blades came out of the hub. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so still working on that, and I also have a G-Sync monitor that I'll be looking at after that.
Excellent. Scott.
I like we said. Now I guess I'm doing phone stuff, doing some phone stuff, which should be interesting. But I don't really want to talk about the details. But phone stuff, a couple of different handsets. So there you go.
And I'm working on leading for Columbia. Going for 10 days. Very excited. Going to consume a lot of Coca-Cola.
Are you? So you're not going to do the podcast from Colombia? That would be kind of cool.
Buenas noches.
You'd be really on point as a host.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hold on 1 second. No, that's not. All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Thank you for putting up with us and our craziness. And by our craziness, I mean my craziness. You can check out our show notes, techreport.com. That's where you also find our Twitter handles and everything you need to know about what's going on with the podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. We'll see you in a new year, guys. 2015. Can't wait. We really can't. It's been such a great year with all of you, and thanks for joining us. It's a lot of moments tonight. It's been a good year. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Enjoy your burrito. That's the line. That's the sign off for the Nerdist podcast. I like that sign off. Anyway, Jordan Drake for the rest of the team at the Tech Report podcast saying so long. I'm in a weird mood tonight.
As opposed to other nights.
More so than usual. If I'm honest, I'm just a little loopy. You guys keep encouraging me though. You laugh. You gotta stop laughing. If you don't laugh, I won't be so.
We love you, man.
You broke up. I can't. It broke up. I missed it. Episode title: Freaks and.
I was saying we love you, Jordan, and we can't help but to laugh. We just love you too much.
But you laugh with me, right? Not at me.
Yeah. No, it's with you. It's with you.
God, I'm glad to hear it. You're a real bro, Zero.
Right on.
Episode 167, Brofest. Episode 167.
All right, let's try. How does this?
Perfect. Let's give it a shot. It's the Tech Report Podcast, episode 167, the best stuff from 2014 and 2015, plus 2 freaking petabytes. Let's try it again.
Petabytes.
PETA
It's the tech. Is that?
I know. PETA is people eating tasty animals.
Yeah.
It's the Tech Report Podcast, episode 167, the best stuff from 2014 and 2015, plus 2 freaking petabytes. Peter picked a pair of pickled peppers. A pair of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked. Peter Piper picked a pair of pickled peppers. How many pickled... I can't do it. All right. It's the Tech Report Podcast, episode 167, the best stuff from 2014 and 2015, plus 2 freaking petabytes. All right. Good night and good luck.
Thank you, guys.
Get it uploaded. See ya. Bye.
Bye.